Welcome to Keeping Score. I'm Rick Horrow. Each week we bring you insights from the playmakers, deal makers, and rule makers in the world of sports. I'll give you my take on some of the items of the week using my 30 years of experience doing deals for teams, leagues, and players in the $750 billion business of sports. Plus, we'll talk with a central figure in the sports world. The views expressed in this podcast are my own and do not represent the views of Reuters. Let's get started. Keeping score again, another busy week. We got a lot. We got baseball, we got football, we got gambling. Maybe you're not supposed to say that with Vegas. We got a little basketball, and we're going to end with Colaruso's favorite sport, soccer, but not yet. We'll get there in a minute. Dan Colaruso, the head of digital for Reuters, as usual. Hey, you okay?
I'm great.
Why are you so good before we start? Why are you great?
I can't wait to get to the soccer because you teased me and you said there's going to be soccer at the end, and I'm on the edge of my little director's chair here.
Yeah, that's what I thought. So remember, when soccer gets to be big here and the Premier League comes here and we want tickets to what amounts to the World Cup, don't call me. All right?
Let's get into it. What do we got?
Let's go. Vegas Raiders looking more likely. Just this last week, Nevada Governor Brian Sandoval signed into law a $750 million deal, basically, to increase the hotel tax, which, of course, is easy because in Vegas, more than anything, people who inhabit hotel rooms do not vote in Vegas. So let's hit them. And they combined it with an expansion of the convention center upgrades of $400 million. What do you have? $750 million for Mark Davis. Vegas goes from no franchises, radioactive, gambling never happened, to one committed and maybe even two. What do you think about that?
I think it's a great demographic play. I know a few weeks ago we were talking about the hockey team, right? The NHL is going to expand into Vegas. And I had said that hockey was a nice sport because you didn't need to draw 75,000 every weekend. You know, if you look at the demographics of Vegas and you look at the demographics of America, and baby boomers retiring a little younger, retiring a little more affluent, and going to the Southwest, going to that part of the country, and especially outside Vegas, I think there's a fan base combined with the degenerate gamblers that actually works out to be probably a supportable franchise if it performs. I mean, you could easily see it turning into a Jacksonville, but you could just as easily see it turning into an Arizona Cardinals.
The bottom line of Mark Davis is that the rumor is, and the sources that I've checked verify it, that he's going to apply for relocation approval, three-quarter vote with the NFL, as early as this January for 2019. Stay in Oakland, build the new stadium while he's playing in Oakland for a couple of years, and do package deals where people fly from Oakland to Vegas Sundays to watch 8 games a year. The good thing about a football stadium is you don't need every day. You need 8 games a year, 2 preseason games, and a lot of postseason stuff like Super Bowls. So it sounds like a pretty good idea, huh?
It sounds like a good idea. The bottom line to remember, right, is he's an NFL owner. So he is going to be magnetically pulled toward the largest pile of cash possible. I think it's a bit of a risk because the Raider Nation, right, has been yanked around between a few different cities in the last 2 decades, right? But again, Vegas is a possibility. It's a lure. If it gets money out of Oakland, great. You know, look, owners have to arbitrage in this market, whether they arbitrage a stadium, arbitrage a city, arbitrage a TV deal. That's how they have to do it.
Let's go from Vegas to tablets. Microsoft spends a heck of a lot of money as far as sponsorship for the NFL and otherwise. Yet Bill Belichick has the temerity, has the guts, I guess he can get away with it, to say, we ain't using the tablets anymore. It's unreliable, it doesn't help us. People may be able to break our code, which I find ironic. And no more Microsoft for the Patriots. Now they got to figure out what to do with it. Is it a sponsorship gone wrong? What do we think of all that?
I think the Russians hacked Belichick's tablet. Was that the story? You know, if you're a New York sports fan, there are not a lot of things to love about Bill Belichick. But boy, this was fun. I mean, the NFL is so conscious of its image and its sponsorship deals, and it's so dictatorial. And for Belichick, I would think the timing on it, he spent like 5 minutes at a press conference talking about it. I mean, that's more time than he spends talking about anything. So it's Belichickian in the greatest possible way, and the league can't do anything about it because he's Belichick. Like if Jim Schwartz or Ben McAdoo had said this, they'd be in Roger Goodell's office having a stern talking to, I imagine. The fact that Belichick said it, he's untouchable, and it's so much fun to watch from a business point of view.
And by the way, Dan, let me put in perspective for the international audience. This would be equivalent to a Premier League coach saying, we're throwing out our equipment. Barclays, the big sponsor, I don't want to use them because their tellers are too slow. Or I'm not going to drive a car because the stick shift falls apart.
Right.
And I was at the game against Cincinnati on Sunday, and Belichick decided, by the way, in his own press conference, so he wants to bring it up. And he brings it up with a tablet, and nobody asked him a question. He said, oh, by the way, just in case you want to know, the tablet stinks. So it's an amazing issue.
If he shows up at the next Apple product launch, there's going to be some hell to pay.
He does just fine, by the way, without using computers. Other people can outsmart him computer-wise, but not this way.
Well, I was going to say he was pretty good at videotaping other teams' practices, no?
Very well done. He has other people do it. You want to get the last shot in before we shift to baseball. Shot noted.
Okay.
Let's shift to baseball. So Under Armour dabbling around the edges. They had Bryce Harper signed to a big contract. They were doing minor leagues and others. But now Under Armour does a massive partnership with Major League Baseball, and it just symbolizes that they're there, and it's like, look at me, Nike, look at me, Adidas, and we are here on our own. What do you think of that whole thing?
I think it's a very nice step for Under Armour. I don't know. Is Majestic owned by any? They've replaced Majestic, right, as the official supplier of Major League Baseball uniforms. Is Majestic owned by a bigger brand, or is Majestic one of those legacy baseball brands?
Well, no. And frankly, when you think of Majestic, it's a small potatoes compared to what our Under Armour now brings to the table, as you know.
Right, and not so long ago, Under Armour was the small potatoes thing. They were very good at publicity, very good at marketing. Their products were okay. They were good. They were good with the kids, young athletes, school athletes, and they really worked their way up the food chain. So as much as you hate to see a great legacy brand like Majestic, small and kind of quaint and very Major League Baseball in its DNA, to see Under Armour make this step and now give Nike, Reebok, Adidas just a little bit of a run for their money at the big league level. It's fantastic. Under Armour has made really good strides, I believe, on their product side. I mean, their products are highly regarded outside of the shoes, the running shoes or the cross training shoes. They really haven't done well there, but they've done well with gear, with performance gear. They've done well with cleats, I believe, and they've done well with a few other things. So they've been in the mix.
Now they're going Olympics, they're going international, and it clearly is a jumping off point, as you say. Sticking with baseball for a minute, how about them Cleveland Indians?
How about them Cleveland? We hadn't heard about them. I didn't even know they were in the postseason. It's fantastic. It's a great story, and it's funny. They're going to out-Cinderella the Cubs if they keep this up.
And the irony is that Cleveland goes from the mistake by the lake sports-wise to one of the first teams or cities that will have sequential champions, if it happens, with the Cavaliers and the Indians back-to-back with their titles of any sports city in the world, let alone America. So good for them. The last time this was done was Lakers, Dodgers, and then I guess you can count Clippers, Dodgers, but the Clippers didn't do it. So Ducks, Dodgers. So, listen, it's a bottom line that the town certainly understands how important sports is for economic development. They had an industry relocate back home, meaning LeBron James, and now they're bearing the fruit.
If you remember back in the 90s, they put together that plan to sign all their young talent to relatively long-term deals, and they tried to stabilize their franchise. They never won a World Series on that, but they had a couple of runs into the postseason, and they had built the Jake, and they were back in the mix, and then they kind of fell off the radar for a while. So it's nice to see a long-term thing come back around in Cleveland. Like, they didn't just die on the vine. They've managed to keep the franchise viable, and this year, really, the Cubs are a powerhouse, and if they win this year, it'll be quaint and romantic, and I've been talking about them on the show for the past 2 weeks, but if they win, it'll be quaint and romantic. But that team is stacked. If you look at the Indians had to make a lot from a little because they've had so many injuries, and they didn't go out and pick up any huge, pricey midseason acquisitions, right? I mean, they've done it with rookies and duct tape and a great manager.
So let's shift to what you wanted to talk about early in the show, which is soccer. And we have always MLS dominating the headlines, but we've got Jake Edwards, who is the commissioner and top guy at the United Soccer League. Do you know anything about the USL?
Not much. I'll confess to ignorance of this. I know MLS pretty well. I have family who work for some of the NSAL revival teams. But what is the USL? Is it a secondary league at this point? Does it play? What are its franchises? Super local? Are they bigger cities?
Super local, but getting to bigger cities. By the way, they drew about 1.5 million last year. They had an increase of about 25% in attendance. They are the 19 American states, 3 Canadian provinces, 29 teams. So it's Oklahoma City, it's Cincinnati, it's Orlando, San Antonio. It's the aspirational MLS guys who want to get into the MLS. But more important than that, every major soccer country has a viable second division. Nothing wrong with that. It's just that's the way the soccer is set up. It's not even like minor league baseball because this is a cut above.
Will teams be relegated out of the MLS into the USL?
Well, that's not what they're thinking about, but there is a structure where teams that can earn their right because of attendance and market value new stadium, they get picked to expand into the MLS long term, and that's what cities like Oklahoma City.
Well, it's like a feeder league in terms of franchises as opposed to players.
Right, feeder league in terms of franchises. Cities like Cincinnati, Oklahoma City, Louisville, that's what they want to do. And the guy that's the architect of all of this is Jake Edwards, the commissioner, and here he is now.
Big time for football. We're almost halfway through the season. We have some ratings issues, but not this kind of football. This football's attendance has increased 33%. The values have doubled. Franchise fees jumped from $250,000 to $3 million in 2016. This is not American football. It's global. It's worldwide. It's soccer. We all understand soccer is caught on in America. That's not the issue. It's caught on for 40 years. But now we have different niches, different leagues, different situations. And to go to the top to explain exactly what the deal is with the different leagues and the opportunities and recipes for success, we're honored to have Commissioner Jake Edwards of the United Soccer League.
Thanks, Rick. Good to be here.
You are one very busy man. Give us an elevator speech about your core metrics.
Well, this league has grown significantly. It's tripled in size over the last 3 years. We are now in 2016 coming into the closing stage of our playoffs, but this season we're now at 29 teams playing in 19 states and 3 Canadian provinces. And now the USL is the largest professional soccer league in North America. We just commissioned a study recently with Nielsen Sports on the fan base, which is now, as they tell us, upwards of 17 million fans across the US and Canada. We had about 1.5 million fans come through the turnstiles at our stadiums this year, and just under 2 million people have watched our broadcasts. So we are experiencing tremendous growth, somewhat in line with the growth that the sport is experiencing on a whole. But yeah, things are going very well for the USL at this point.
You take a look at the niche. You call yourself a vital part of soccer in the United States, more than doubled since 2014, offering the highest level of competition under the MLS on a national footprint, strong local ownership groups, et cetera, et cetera. There's an American football expression called outkick your coverage and doing more than you should. It sounds like your attendance and your kind of stepping stone to greater things, if possible, is just the right opportunity under the evolution of soccer's growth in North America. Agree?
Agree, yeah, and I suppose in England you'd say you're punching above your weight, but
right, exactly.
What we're trying to build here is the highest level of on-field competition underneath Major League Soccer, and Major League Soccer have done a tremendous job over the last 20 years of building a really sustainable, quality professional league. Now, for us, it's about understanding where we are in the landscape and not trying to be somebody we're not, but being the very best at who we are and what we can be. It's more familiar in other countries with soccer to have different divisions, and what does it mean to have a first division, second division, third division, etc. And so in America, it's sort of major league, minor league in the vernacular, and so it's we're trying to showcase who we are and what we want to be, and we want to be ultimately one of the top second division leagues in the world. And when we look at some of those second division leagues, such as the Championship in England, which is one of the 4th largest professional leagues in Europe by size, by stadium size, by attendances and club revenues. That's what we're looking to emulate, and so we've spent a lot of time trying to evolve the business, evolve the league, and ultimately create a high-level competition and build clubs in underserved markets across the United States, and build clubs that are sustainable businesses, and clubs that are going to be part of those communities for many, many years to come. And I'm happy to say we're achieving that.
So FC Cincinnati becomes America's Fulham, And, some of us who understand the economics of relegation, it's quite interesting. This is not relegation, but it is clearly a number where if expansion fees are $3 million as advertised, and Don Garber is attempting to get MLS fees north of $100 million, there are some similarities, obviously, between First Division and Second Division in European football and this. Am I right?
Yeah, very much. I mean, we don't have a promotion relegation system here. You have two different organizations that are structured very differently as businesses, but there's some similarities. But in this model, it's a franchise model, and you don't work your way up the divisions. You buy the rights to a market, and you pay those fees. And for us and for MLS, it's about how do we as a league drive value for our investors? How do we look after the investment of those owners into our league? How do we create more and more services to increase the value of those clubs? And so we've seen 3 years ago franchise fees at about $500,000, and as you said, they're $3 million now, actually moving to $5 million. So there's been a tremendous growth in franchise value, not least in terms of the franchise fees to join the league, but ownership, investment into ownership of new clubs and existing clubs has been pretty solid over the last few years, and our clubs have been, achieving some very impressive valuation estimates as they've been taking on new ownership and new investors into those clubs. So,
Jake Edwards, the interesting thing about this piece, though, is as you talk about it, is that I've been in some of your markets recently in Oklahoma City and Funk and McLaughlin. They're doing an amazing job with the energy, by the way, and they are part of the big-time civic leadership in town, which is also very important. I would assume from the perspective of Cincinnati, Sacramento, Louisville, San Antonio, St. Louis, etc., there are higher aspirations, but they don't consider themselves minor league soccer the way you would a AA or AAA baseball team, which I assume is very good for you guys.
Yeah, and as I said before, we don't embrace that vernacular either. We don't embrace that positioning of our league. That's not how we see ourselves, and that's not how the clubs see themselves. We differentiate ourselves from Major League Soccer, but we want to come forward as a very confident second division, a very confident, sustainable business, a good investment, and people like Bob and Tim out in Oklahoma City, who you've recently met, are a great example of some of the kind of quality and ownership who are coming into the league. And these guys are investing heavily into their communities. They're working with the civic leadership. They're trying to build stadiums, very impressive stadium downtown. Those folks are trying to building youth clubs, academy, training facilities, and just trying to make their communities a better place to live, work, and play. But they're putting a lot of money into it, and we have a number of markets that have ownership that have different goals and aspirations, and so they're certainly investing into those clubs to, as I said, build them forward. They're not limited by a sort of, we're minor league, so we only need to invest and do things at a certain level. They're doing things at the highest level, and we challenge our ownership to do that all the time. And we have clubs that are run at different levels than others, like every league has. But we challenge them to do more. And many of our teams over the last number of years have actually moved up into MLS because they have been able to run their businesses at such a high level and build a solid club and build those impressive fan bases and have made the move up.
And the relationships, you try to, I would guess, evoke a little bit of history. Growing up in South Florida, we remember the Fort Lauderdale Strikers. They're not in your league, but the Tulsa Roughnecks and the Vancouver Whitecaps, certainly are. And there is an opportunity to bring back the history of the late 70s and kind of morph it into today. Bigger issue: Olympic soccer, international soccer, Premier League on the major networks in the mornings on Saturday and Sunday. All of that general interest in soccer, I assume, trickles down to the USL?
Yeah, absolutely. As I said, the sport is in a really strong place right now. It's really in the ascendancy, I think, over here. And what we're seeing in our markets, and for many of our markets, we are the only professional soccer in those markets. So we reach about 75 million people, if I aggregate the MSAs of the USL markets, 30 million of those with the only professional soccer they have in their market. So the popularity of the sport, whether that's through consuming the sports overseas leagues or the MLS on the early morning, Saturday morning TV, and then coming to our games in the evening, we're seeing it. We're seeing the effect. I've traveled to many of the stadiums now. You see supporters groups in large numbers at our games, and they're very sophisticated. They're educated. They know the players, who the players are around the world, and who they are in the US. They're coming with. They're marching from the pubs to the stadiums, and they've got flags and smoke and painted faces, and they're into it, and they're part of a community and a culture and a supporters group, and they're taking pride in their city through their USL team. So we're seeing a big impact from that. We're not seeing, unlike MLS, who are perhaps competing for television ratings with some of those other leagues. We're not. We have a digital focus, and we put most of our time and effort into the digital streaming side of things. So we don't see an impact in that respect. But in terms of the attendance at the games, like I said, the top 10 teams now in our league are pushing 7,000, and so. That's up as a whole 1.5 million people, is up 30% on last year. So we're seeing the effect of, I think, the popularity in the game. But it's also about building clubs and having those communities take pride and show pride in their city through those clubs. So they're coming out in greater numbers.
Jake Edwards, what is the biggest challenge or maybe challenges that face you over the next couple of years?
Yeah, good question. Get that one a lot because a lot of exciting things happening. I think really it's the growth. I think when we're still in a growth mode, like many young companies, and so we're trying to build a sustainable league, sustainable clubs. But now we're looking at other areas of the business that are now becoming extremely important for us as we prepare for the next 5 years. And that is, we're investing, for example, $8 million now in a 3-year project to improve our broadcast and to take control of the 500-plus games that we'll have next season and fully produce them ourselves in one central location. And managing that investment and that project is going to be significant. And if we can get that right, then we can start adding a lot more value to the commercial partners. We're launching a commercial program this year in earnest for next season. And so it's the other areas of the business that are now coming into focus. When I joined 3 years ago, we had 15 staff at the league office. We've got 42 staff now and growing. And I've hired 7 people on the digital and social media side alone this year because that is really where we're focusing a lot of time and effort. So really the challenge is I'm not worried about the game. The game's in great hands here. It's in good shape. It's making sure every day that we can maintain sort of operational excellence, that I have the right people in the building here at the league office, and making sure that we can manage all those other new areas of the business that we need to invest in to keep it growing forward.
I guess part of the issue too is
the growth is the challenge.
Growth is a challenge, and I would also argue, I guess, and ask you about managing expectations, because I assume in a league that sticks to a deliberate business plan that is structured by an entrepreneur with your background and expertise, the biggest issue is to moderate excitement and channel it into a consistent pattern of growth. I also assume that the Louisvilles and Cincinnatis and Oklahoma Cities during football season, make no mistake, it's Sooner country and it's Buckeye country and I guess it's Louisville Cardinals, but you fight for your niche and you grow from it, right?
Yeah, that's right. I used to play myself for many years in the UK, and when I was playing, my focus was always, you don't ever get too high and don't ever get too low. Read the good things and you don't read the bad things about you. It's a very long game, and so keep it steady. And I think that's the mantra when I work with the team owners, that wonderful things are happening in Louisville right now. Wonderful things are happening in Cincinnati and Sacramento and San Antonio. But by the way, this is your first season or your second season. And so, let's look at 5 years, 10 years down the road. Are you still able to achieve those kind of numbers? Are you still relevant in your community with all those other sports in that landscape? And so how do we incrementally build the teams? And we are structured as an organization in a way that the teams are independently owned and operated organizations responsible in large part for their own financial success. And however, we're a service organization, and so it's imperative that we spend a lot of time with our clubs and our owners to make sure all areas of their business are being looked after. And we do that as a collective. All of our teams participate in that and help each other. So it's very important that we get that message to our teams, that it's a long game, and we just incrementally step forward each year, and we build upon the success from each year. It's not, hey, we've arrived, we've just done a season and we've got great crowds, we've arrived, we can take a foot off the gas. Always year 2, year 3, year 4 get harder and harder. Soccer is really, it's exploding over here, but it's still not one of the major sports. It's still a challenger sport, and within the sport, we are a challenger league, and so we still have to keep working harder and harder and harder than everybody else.
And the ship is in good shape with a captain and steward like Jake Edwards. Thank you very much, Jake. Speak with you soon.
All right. Thanks so much, Rick. Appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to this edition of Keeping Score. I'm Rick Horrow. The producer of the show, Alex Cohen. Associate producer, Bethel Habte. Assistance provided by Tanner Simpkins and Carlos Waddick. And the executive editor of Reuters Digital, Dan Colarusso.